What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and today we're going to mix things up and talk a little bit of news. Now, I know we've been grinding a lot of hands here on the channel lately. That's going to probably be the primary emphasis moving forward, but I like to every now and then talk about what's happening in the world of poker. Some of our topics today include Nick Marchington getting sued over 10% of his winnings from the World Series of Poker main event, the Triton High Roller coming to a close with Zhuang taking it down, a new all-time money leader in tournaments, and of course, ACR tournaments are freezing. I'm not fucking doing any more ACR stories. I'm sick of it. I'm not doing it. Don't play there. But before we jump into it, I want to let you guys know you have a week left to use promo code PolkerHands over at Upswing Poker for a $25 discount on any of our courses. Let's kick things off by talking about this Nick Marchington story because it's kind of interesting and it does bring out some good questions. According to what I can read online, the story goes something like this. Nick Marchington agreed to sell action for two separate events, for a 6-max event as well as the main event. Now, he sold them with markup and booked action with using the words, quote, "We are booked, let's get rich." Honestly, I'm just a little surprised that something failed where someone said, "Let's get rich." Those stories always pan out well.
Fuck off.
Now, there's a lot of steps in this story, but I'm going to kind of make it a little on the shorter side. Basically, it goes down like this. Nick agreed to sell this action to these investors. They agreed on it. He received the money. Then he decided to not play one of the first events, and then he said he was probably not going to play anything at all, sent them their money back. And then when he realized he could sell at a higher markup for the main event, decided to actually play it, but sell to other people at a higher price. This is kind of a shitty move. If two people make an agreement, it's my opinion that they should have to be tied to that agreement until they both decide that they don't want to do it anymore. You can't make an agreement with somebody and then the other person says, actually, I changed my mind, so the agreement doesn't count anymore. That's just not really the way that things work, and that's not the way the contract should work, as well as just being a good person, right? Even if, like, let's just say, for example, you could do this to someone, you really shouldn't. Your word should be your bond, and if you agree to sell at a set price, well, then that should be the price that you sell at, regardless of if you could do better. I actually think that if he said, I'll sell you at 1.1 and 1.2 unless I can get a better price before the main event, it would be a pretty shitty thing to say, but at least then it could be reasonable. But selling at a price, making an agreement, getting the money, and then trying to find a better price and sending them back their money afterwards, that's just a shitty play. Anyway, because karma's not a thing, Nick ended up making a really deep run in the main event. In fact, he final tabled, and if he had won the event, he would have been the youngest main event winner of all time, coming in at the age of 21. He ended up going out in 7th place, good for $1.5 million. Not a bad score, all things considered. But here's the thing. This is where the story starts to take a turn. Right after his score, the original investors sued him, filing with Clark County. Nick actually found out about this when he cashed an event after the main and his money was held up. So basically now this is going through the courts. And I think even though it was a pretty shitty move to do what Nick did, I think what these guys are doing is much worse because it is a free roll. They can't possibly have owed money for the main, but they're trying to collect 10% of what happened. If somebody cancels your action, maybe you could argue that you should get your value or like what you should have made from the event or you know, anything like that. I think that's still a pretty aggressive argument, but those might be things that are reasonable to say. But assuming that if someone cancels your piece, you now get 10% of their result anyway, well, that, my friend, is a free roll. What if Nick had sold more than 50% of himself twice? What if he'd sold 60% before and 60% afterwards? Would he owe 120% of his cashes? Obviously not. He can't. First off, he would have no incentive to win. And then second off, how would he afford to pay it out if he had a really big score? That's just not, it's not reasonable. You can't just ask somebody to pay out either way, right? These are two separate issues, but this is certainly a punishment that doesn't fit the crime. This is all in all another ridiculous lawsuit in the world of poker. I mean, look, poker is going to be full of scumbags. It's going to be. There's gambling, and whenever there's gambling, you're going to get some unsavory characters. But at the same time, this is really from both sides. This is a player doing something unethical, and then the backer is trying to, enforce getting money that they're really not entitled to. I think that really what I would say to take away from this story, guys, is if you're going to enter into any financial agreement in poker, have very clear guidelines as to how you're going to operate, what can happen if something on certain events, what the breakdown of the pieces will be, and then what's going to happen moving forward in the future after the agreement finishes. Because a lot of times these are things that people don't talk about, they don't work out, they don't figure out in advance, and then what happens is the can gets kicked down the road, and they end up in spots like this where you have a lot of money at stake and a lawsuit that really never had to happen at all. At the end of the day, what Marchington did was pretty shitty, but it doesn't mean he deserves to pay out twice. And I'm pretty sure Hartley and Yi definitely would have sued to have to pay their piece if he'd lost the tournament. Moving on to our next story, Aaron Zhang won the $1 million Triton Super High Roller. This is a tournament we've been covering some hands of right here on the channel and also been talking about a lot lately. All in all, I would say this event was a success. It had a £1 million buy-in. It had excellent coverage from what the online community seems to be saying, and I think people were very excited and interested in seeing what happened in this event. Aaron Zhang won the event, but I believe due to a chop that happened a little bit earlier, he ended up getting second place money, with Bryn Kenney taking down £17 million. Some other notable scores here include Dan Smith in third for $7 million, Stephen Chidwick in fourth for $4.4, Vivek in fifth for $3 million, and Bill Perkins in sixth for $2.2 million. And then we had a few other people cashing the tournament as well. You know, an event is decent size when you cash for $1.7 million and it's not even noteworthy. The structure for this event was kind of weird. The recreational players could buy in and they got to pick a pro that they would enter into the tournament. And I actually wanted to ask you guys, what do you think about that format? In fact, if we look at the PolkerNews listing, everyone's listed as a rec or a pro. Do you think that's good? Do you think that's bad? What do you think about this being a common format in the future? Do you think it's a dangerous precedent, or do you think that it's good to allow this so that more recs might want to play? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I personally have kind of mixed feelings, and normally I have fairly strong opinions on things, but this one, I can see pros and cons, or pros and recs. On one hand, it's nice to promote playing poker, but on the other hand, it's a little dangerous just to let a certain club of people decide who gets to play. In fact, that's one of the things I always loved about poker was it didn't matter who you were. If you had the money, you sat down, you played. That's changing, especially at high stakes, and I don't know if that's a good thing. We've seen this happen with some of the private cash games. I mean, look at what's been going on in Vegas and all of the poaching of the biggest players. It's kind of turned into this environment of, you have to basically pay someone off or have some deal to get into certain games so that you can play, where, I don't feel like that should be the goal of poker. On the other hand, people get to decide who they want to play with, right? It's their money and they don't have to play if they don't want to. So there is some sort of balance that has to be struck. And this tournament actually provides an interesting answer. Not necessarily the best, but at least an interesting one. The other headlining story from this event is Bryn Kenney moves into first place in the all-time money list, surpassing Justin Bonomo. If we take a look at the list, Bryn Kenney is now in first place with $55.5 million, Bonomo in second with $45 million. I love that he not only surpasses him, but he surpasses him by 8 figures from one event. Certainly noteworthy. D-Negs in third with $42 million, Dan Smith in fourth with $37 million, and Eric Seidel in fifth with $35.7. So my thoughts on that are, it's really kind of silly. Look, I'm not trying to take anything away from these guys, but it's important to recognize this list is going to be dominated by people that ran hot in $1 million tournaments. I mean, how many $1 million tournaments have we had? 6, 7, something like that? This list is going to be all those people. Basically, whoever won those tournaments, they're going to be up top because they just won so much from those individual events that it's kind of a silly metric because of how lopsided it makes things. Additionally, when you look at this list, these pros probably had very small pieces of themselves in a lot of these events, and additionally, it doesn't take into account their buy-ins. I mean, really, what this list is who plays high rollers a lot and runs good when the buy-in's really big. Yeah, that makes sense, actually. I do have to give a special shout out to Bryn Kenney, who just gangstered it up and tried to bet his team of him and Kerry versus everyone, versus any other team in the field, and got a bunch of money down on it, including someone saying what his max would be, and he said, don't bother if you're not doing over 100K. We need more Bryn Kenney tweets like this and less Justin Bieber fight challenges. It's a strange one. Anyway, I think it's fine to have most money cash for because it's something that new players might look at and make them want to play, even if it is a little bit misleading and these $1 million tournaments will heavily influence the results. Whatever, man, it's all for the lulz anyway. Our last story I wanted to cover tonight was the passing of Richard Lindaker, otherwise known online as Nuts and Ho, who unfortunately about a week ago passed away from an overdose on some pain pills that he was prescribed for a soccer injury. I think what made this feel so sad to me was that when I got into poker, I didn't really look up to a lot of the live guys. I liked the online players. I liked watching them play on PokerStars and see them duke it out. And Rich was one of those guys that played very high stakes on PokerStars from the get-go, at least since I got involved. And I used to like to watch how he played and see hands, and it made me dream to one day play those stakes. I remember back when poker table ratings was a thing, looking up Rich's graph and seeing that it was insanely good and that he was a really good high stakes player, and he was doing all this weird stuff like 3-betting smaller in position. And I was like, why is he doing that, right? And some of those sizes were probably a little bit too small, but he made me think about things, and it made me dream. And I only really got the chance to meet Rich a couple times in real life, but I did get to hang out with him a time or two. And I can say that he seemed like a very genuinely nice guy, maybe a little bit on the introverted side, so I didn't get to know him too well, but just a good person, and it's sad that we have to kind of tackle these things as a community and see this happen. And we'll have more of it. That's the way life works. Part of the human experience is also that it comes to an end. So, I just wish the best for Rich's friends and family. And I just want to take a moment to remember the greatness that was Nuts and Ho, and the legacy that he'll leave on the virtual felt. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. Thank you for joining. A little bit of a somber note here, but I'll see you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Peace.